Blackmail, sabotage, and betrayal. The Amba Papers, today on Amba, this week. I used to wonder why rich and influential people in our communities hardly bring their kids to visit our villages and spend quality time with their people. They fear poisoning or spiritual sabotage from their own people. A rich man will build a school in his village to educate his people and bring them to consciousness. And his fellow tribesmen will be the ones to sabotage the school, struggling, fighting against him and stopping other villagers from attending this school. A rich man will buy a new car, and his own tribesmen and people around him in his community will say, "He the overshow. If you say get money pass who? He is an occultist. What he thinks he be?" Christ and his people must have been melanated, for those who killed him shouted, "Crucify, crucify him," at the astonishment of the Roman Pontius Pilate, who knew Christ was innocent and washed his hands of the case. The wicked black man syndrome. We are a people who preach unity but practice vice. Every objective man will accept that the ADF started the armed struggle against Cameroon and had a clear-cut strategy on how to prosecute the war for the independence of Ambazonia. As the Coffin Revolution had failed to bear fruits, as teachers, lawyers, and students rose to demand respect for the Anglo-Saxon culture, what did Cameroon do? They kidnapped, jailed, and killed most of the leadership. Thus, the revolution faced a difficult time. The revolution was at a nosedive when the ADF started striking Cameroon military positions, making clear their policy, method for method, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. They said, that is the only language that Cameroon understands. These actions of the ADF came with a pushback from leaders who availed themselves as legitimate, writing letters to Yaoundé apologizing for the actions of the ADF, terming the ADF forces as terrorists. ADF na terrorist organization. We need for use na non-violence for get independence. ADF they use uniform them. They call themselves army. They want a guerrilla warfare. See the ADF soldier them. They went and Changshu. I beg. ADF they work for Cameroon. You see, na Cameroon they supply ADF weapon them. Who side did they take all the gun them? It must na Cameroon must give them the weapon them. Those were some of the statements made by some enablers sponsored by Cameroon in order to sabotage the actions of the ADF because they knew the game was on. In order to stop the dream for Ambazonia's independence, as they saw it, Cameroon hatched a plan to arrest and jail, even kill, all leaders and remnants of the leadership that believed in independence for Ambazonia. They plotted with some pastors and sold out the locations of the leaders in Nigeria, Nera Hotel. And with the knowledge of the Nigerian authorities, they kidnapped these leaders and transferred them to Kondingi in Yaoundé. Cameroon thus lurked in the shadows of all decision-makings by all remnants of Ambazonia groups and Ground Zero fighters. They had to destroy all nationalist forces. This led to the rise of the pastors. They made sure they put in motion policies which were counter-revolutionary, knowingly or unknowingly, to destroy the freedom quest of the Ambazonians. They had other plans of ministerial appointments and had negotiated a federal system with the Cameroon regime in closed doors. The nationalist forces were then to be destroyed for this to work. Every plan was made to destroy these genuine fighters. Nationalist forces were suspended from the revolution by these pastors and their supporters who felt entitled and called themselves the people's government. Real trouble and chaos had begun, and for many years they killed, blackmailed, and sabotaged every activities of these nationalist armies. Then came the rise of the activists. They came to improve the already planned strategy to destroy the nationalist fighters. Shows upon shows were geared towards sabotage, blackmail, lies telling and misinformation of the masses of Ambazonians on matters concerning genuine fighters. Like the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, that was the situation in the Ambazonian struggle. Cameroon started bribing these activists, using other enablers and encouraged them as they sabotaged the revolution.
They will be crushed. This, what happened in Bui, should send a message to the ADF and the AGOVC that this interim government would no longer sit down to negotiate with you out.
Fighters who rejected the actions of the pastors and activists were killed directly or indirectly. Their locations were leaked to the Cameroon forces. Their phone numbers were leaked to the public. Their families were exposed. Many were caught and buried alive. Camps were attacked, seized, and all fighters who rejected the pastors were killed and their camps burned to the ground. In many cases, when they attacked the nationalist forces and these forces acted in self-defense, they ran to the media and cried foul. Bribery, corruption, nepotism, tribalism, embezzlement, not forgetting enablers were on the rise in the Ambazonian revolution.
That man a Bamenda man, make it go back for Bamenda, make it go back for your village. We didn't know county by county. Any man go for your village.
As consequence, millions of dollars were lost with no one giving accountability of what happened to the money meant for defense and humanitarian activities. Fighters with no arms started switching sides, joining the DDR center and Cameroon's forces, hunting back their former colleagues in the bushes of Ambazonia. Leaders, after being bribed by Cameroon, started joining the CPDM. Cameroon started having huge gains in areas formerly controlled by Ambazonian fighters. Talk about the wicked black man syndrome. As Frelimo in Mozambique was busy destroying and attacking the enemy forces from Portugal that occupied their country, Renamo was busy sabotaging the efforts of Samora Machel and Frelimo. This did not stop the fighters of Frelimo from persecuting the war against Portugal, forcing the Portuguese army to go back to Portugal, taking out the general who ruled over Portugal and Mozambique at the time. Mozambique thus had its independence. The SPLA of John Garang suffered many betrayals and blackmail from within and without his army, but they never gave up and kept fighting for South Sudan's independence. Even in South Africa, the ANC that fought for the freedom of all blacks and coloreds faced a huge attack from other black communities led by chiefs and kings who were empowered by the apartheid regime. To protect their power, they had to side with the European masters against their own freedom fighters. This never stopped South Africa from getting its independence. Enablers and blacklegs outnumbered the fighters who fought for Algeria's independence. It never stopped Algeria from attaining freedom. Let's now dive into the Haitian Revolution. Many of the leaders fell along the way, but their fight against slavery triumphed. Toussaint Louverture was lured by France into a trap called dialogue, where he was imprisoned. This never stopped the revolution after he died in France, for his lieutenant, Dessalines, continued to prosecute the war against France and declared Haitian independence on the 1st of January, 1840. We all know the story of the field Negro and the house Negro. The house Negro lived with Master, and he loved Master more than he loved himself. Whenever the field Negro plans to run away, the house Negro will tell Master the plans of the field Negroes. That is the case of the pastor, Achobang Paul Tambeng, government delegate to the city council of Bamenda, and pastor to a Pentecostal church in Bamenda. Addressing some NGOs and Ambazonian people, he said, "Don't seek revenge in the name of justice. I am against the Canadian dialogue. Don't place justice as a condition for peace." These are the caliber of pastors that have risen in Ambazonia. They have been tried and have all been found wanting.
Effective lies teller in political theaters are those who in broad daylight can conjure, fabricate a lie with a clean face. We're not talking about little lies, big lies. And the perception of human nature is such that if it was a lie, the person will not say it with such boldness and repeatedly. That is why these people, the Chris Anus and the others, have been able to convince Ambazonians. where Ambazonians start, well, if this thing was really a lie, this guy wouldn't be saying. I mean, these guys call for the killing of our soldiers. You imagine it? In the middle of a war, you ask for the killing of your own defenders, accusing them of being part of the enemy structures. Our people looked at it and say it is too big to be a lie. So what irritates you is not their presence, it's that people can be so bold to tell these blatant lies repeatedly. And that is where you fail. Because what you are doing is what the SCNC they were doing in the early 90s, matching the force of argument with the argument of force. And we told them no, it's method for method, ideal for ideal.
Dr. Lucas Cho Ayaba and his brave ADF have suffered the most from blackmail, sabotage, the wicked Blackman syndrome. He has this to say in an interview that I had with him concerning the consequences of these actions that are unpatriotic towards genuine fighters in Ambazonia. Welcome to the show, Doctor.
Thanks, Samuel, and thanks for having me.
You preached at the commencement of the Ambazonia War of Independence that Ambazonians should be the primary investors in their struggle. Do you think that is the case today?
Thanks for the question. Yes, at the beginning of this struggle and even at this moment, I think Ambazonians, for them to be able to own the outcome of their resistance, they must be the primary investors in their own liberation. I think we've studied most liberation struggles in the past 60 years, those which were ideologically driven, saw an economic and political ideology implanted within the liberated spaces, and those ideologies sometimes supplanted the indigenous ways of doing things. And the effect is what we have seen in the decay of the natural pattern of lives, extortion and exploitation of resources by foreign companies without reciprocation in development, degradation of the environment, and a total lack of connection between the international and the local. So for us to gain actual independence and to be free, I mean independence in terms of the right of Amazonians to develop an indigenous political system, to apply an economic philosophy that responds to their geopolitical and economic realities, we need to be the primary investors in that liberation process as to be able to own the outcome. As to whether Amazonians have been the primary investors, absolutely. All the barracks around Amazonians where soldiers are based, are occupied by Amazonians. The soldiers that are killed are Amazonians. The parents and people who observe collective resistance days on Mondays are Amazonians. 95% or almost 100% of the investment in terms of finances are done by Amazonians. So Amazonians have been the primary investors in their own liberation. Maybe the question is, have we invested enough? Yes, we have also invested enough in terms of the sacrifices that we have made. I mean, the investment Amazonians have made has been going on for the past 62 years in every little attempts to protect their own institutions, their way of life, and to have a dignified way of living. So Amazonians have sacrificed, they continue to sacrifice. And my hope is that with just a little more push, we will get over the line, and all the suffering that we have gone through, the memories of those who have passed away, we will capture those things in the celebrations, in the recognition that we will give for the sacrifices that people have made.
The tax policy is being sabotaged by some activists. Can you explain with clarity how it functions and the future of this policy?
Yes, the tax policy, I know Amazonians are, they're a classical set of persons, and a few of them. Don't forget that at the beginning of our resistance, most of the policies that we prescribed were not only sabotaged, they were vigorously fought against. People did not see the wisdom behind several policies. And with time, they have come to not only embrace those policies, they have even attempted to take those policies over. At the beginning of this phase in the last 7 years, Amazonians have been taxed. They have been taxed. And in the diaspora, Comrade Ayuk Tabe instituted what they call the citizens levy. And people invested a lot of money. Other leaders have instituted different forms of taxation that have been largely respected. On the ground, our forces have been collecting support from our population. Those are forms of taxation which have not really been codified. By codification, I mean regulated, that is seen as a form of taxation that can be regulated by political authority and seen to be commensurate with the economic situation of our people. All wars of liberation are sponsored by the people who are fighting in terms of the lives they pay with and in terms of the economic sacrifices they make all the time. And what we have observed in our struggle are a couple of things. One, our exile population prided itself with two things. One, attempting to internationalize the struggle, which has been very successful. Initial mobilization of resources in terms of funding, which has also been very successful. But as time has gone by, because of the schisms, the divisions, it has affected the level of financial mobilization. And on the other hand, our forces on the ground have from the beginning been receiving support from the neighborhoods, villages, and all sorts of all forms of support from communities. We have also observed that different forces have been instituting some levels of taxation. And we have also realized that because of the ungovernable spaces created by the defeat of La République in certain areas, bad actors, extortionists, kidnapping for ransom has gone up. And that's what also inspired, on the one hand, the liberation tax, and on the other hand, the general taxation that we are thinking about at this particular moment. On the liberation tax issue, we have basically targeted businesses, mostly foreign businesses that are operating within Amazonia, for two reasons. One, most of those foreign businesses are sources of capital flight. The money they make is hardly reinvested in creating opportunities for Amazonia, whether they are job opportunities, recreation, or education. They are shipped to where they presume there is what they call economic and political stability. On the other hand, we also know that some of these businesses, and most of them have been paying taxes to La République, which has collected this money to continuously fund the war against our people. But also the most important thing, taxation is related to territoriality. You only impose taxes where you have jurisdiction and you have control. La République has no control over Amazonia. It has no jurisdiction over Amazonia. The people with jurisdiction and control the Amazonian forces. And the question we should ask ourselves is, should businesses pay taxes to La République to use in burning homes and committing genocide? Or should they pay these taxes to Amazonian forces who can use to equip themselves more, defend our population, and liberate our country? That's a simple logical question which we have answered in a way that strengthens Ambazonian claim to our homeland, and also make sure that our forces have the resources they need to be able to defend our civilian population, protect the territorial integrity of our country. On the other hand, we have also realized that there is need for the development of institutions within Amazonia. When you fight to liberate a land, the first thing you do is to attempt to dismantle the institutions that the occupier has created. Institutions like education, whether it's services by councils, are created for specific reasons. Removing of trash from the city, developments, issues of policing. So our population has been dependent on the enemy for 62 years. It is easy for us to shout that children should not go to school, but that is only a short-term strategy. The long-term strategy is to create alternative forms of education that continuously educate our children. If you do not do that, there are two things that will happen. The population will fall back depending on the enemy, or you will leave a vacuum where on the issue of education, our children, the young ones, will not be able to read and write. And even if you're free, you have an uneducated population. On the other hand, the vacuum might be filled in by bad actors. Civil society depends on institutions. And institutions are created and sustained through policies of taxation. We do not have massive access to our resources where we can generate enough money to sustain community education, repair roads, and build communities, vocational training of the young, and to create opportunities within those communities. And that is why the forces on the ground have been thinking thoroughly about forms of taxation that could be instituted for them to be able to deal with these civil society issues. And we have examined that, but we have also realized if you just give all powers in the hands of the military, it will be abused. And that's why we instructed the forces that the setting up of the transitional authorities within communities is important. These transitional authorities will be constituted by the civilian population alongside our forces, and they will be highly responsible for issues of tax collection, development, and policing. And we think if you ask individuals to pay, say, 10,000, 15,000 a year for their own freedom, that's not much. And we have given these communities to be able to determine how much they can pay. And we look at it, we attempt to regulate it based on our knowledge of these communities. And I am sure that, and this is also a means of self-government. These detractors and saboteurs, they have been shouting in the past year that, they should, ground zero should take charge. This is the practical way of ground zero taking charge. And once we're trying to make sure that we regulate the way that ground zero functions, they are scared. They don't hate the tax because they know at this moment forces collect taxes from our population. They are scared that once it is regulated by Dr. Choa Yaba and the Amazonian Governing Council, it means we have a sense of ownership. Yes, we have a sense of ownership. All those shouting out there make no investment to our people. They are town criers, and they'll get tired like other town criers in the past. Our population should know we do everything taking their interest into consideration. In this taxation, teachers are exempted. The handicaps are exempted. Those who are poor, we know what is going on in those households. They are exempted. We also know that in certain areas, the elites still have a very powerful voice, and they are all hiding either in Yaoundé or Douala, or some of them are out there. So they are making a lot of noise. Amazonians should ignore noise. They all shouted about everything that we have put in place for our freedom. and it has turned out to be that we were correct. We have also engaged some of them in consultation, you know, and we can't stop them. They all have a megaphone in front of them. We can't stop them screaming. But 7 years into this war, I think our population is more educated. They are more aware that sabotage has been the only thing that they have in abundance. Nothing else. They've proposed nothing that can push La Republic out. They've done nothing that has strengthened Amazonia in one way or the other. All what they've been doing is talking, blackmailing, and those things have a short lifespan.
Last week, there was a ghastly motor accident in Moliwe, taking the lives of 12 people. What is the cause of these many accidents on the Amazonian roads? What policies can be put in place to stop these many accidents?
In terms of the accidents that you have raised, these are not accidents. These are deliberate policies by Cameroon to make sure that, Amazonian roads become death traps for mass murder. Thousands of our people have lost their lives on our roads. We produce enough energy, we have enough resources to develop highways. We have the willpower to develop institutions that regulate transportation, that construct roads that do not endanger the lives of our people. But La Republique has the first thing they did was to destroy Amazonian institutions. The public works department, was destroyed. Everything that could make Amazonia self-develop itself was ripped apart. The banks that could sustain development and create opportunities were all looted. They've just left the people who are struggling on their own. All of the routes they've set in place are either, exploiting our resources and shipping them over. You have on narrow highways trucks parked on the highway without any lights for drivers to see from a distance. But along those same highways, you have extorting police and military officers, ripping our people apart and collecting money. La Republique knows that its tenure in Amazonia is over. They are doing everything they can to murder our people and extort as much as they can before we take over. And I think the future under an Amazonian government would be better, where there would be an investment in our infrastructure as to strengthen our economic development and to make sure that, the primary responsibility of every government is to protect the lives of its own people, and for people to be held accountable for recklessness and engaging in actions that cost the lives of our people. At this stage, we have been doing little developmental projects in the suburbs. There is not much we can do now in the urban areas of our country. And that's why, as I said, this taxation is important to strengthen our forces engaged in these developments so that we can push the enemy further and further and take charge of our resources and begin to pave our roads in such a way that it guarantees public safety and the lives of our communities. I really want to extend my condolences to these bereaved families and to really ask Amazonians to pray for our people on ground zero. It's been extremely very hard without a war where we were defending, and then imagine what our people are going through at this particular moment. And I want to assure them that we will do everything and we should work together to speed up the day that this enemy is finally eliminated from our country, and to give our people hope again in their miserable existence.
The war rages on. What is the future for Amazonia? We will keep you updated on this program, Amba, This Week.
We are in Blackman.